Hello everyone and welcome to Senior Susie Stamps. Several months ago I made some clusters after watching a video by Sandy, and she has a channel that's called Septeria18. She's out of Sydney, Australia, and I kind of enjoy watching her. She's inspiring to me for using scraps in unusual sorts of ways. And after I watched a video from her, I made some clusters. And here are some of the ones that I have made. And I thought today it might be kind of fun, because I made these out of scraps, to see if we couldn't make some cards and projects out of these types of clusters that maybe will be just a little bit unusual. So I thought I would start with them, and I've put together a little bit of pre-work done. Here's one that I made. I'm not overly satisfied with this particular one, primarily because I just don't like it. I think the shape is good and the concept is good, but I don't care for that yellow and the pink together. But it is in the original paper has pink and yellow and green in it, so it should coordinate and work just fine. And I just don't particularly like that kind of thing. But you'll see that I've got some Love from Lizzie peel-offs here, and 3 scraps of paper and 2 more scraps of colored paper there. And it actually is a roadworthy card, but I just don't happen to like it. So it may end up in the bin. I'm not sure. But so anyway, let's get started, because I've got 3 or 4 things. And before we start, well, no, we'll just do it this way. So let me move my coffee. Hang on. I think these kinds of things, let me give you a little close-up here. These kinds of things are just fun to make. And if you've not made any clusters before, get your scraps out and some punches and some little small stamps, and just try to make a few, because the first 3 or 4 that you make, you'll think, what is this all about? And then all of a sudden, something will just click, and everything will fall in place, and you'll have a nice little cluster. Now, this is something that you could back with white paper and make a hanging tag for a little gift bag, and that would be fine. But today, I think we'll make a card out of it. And I have some paper that's left over from, hang on, this paper pack from Paper Studio, which is a Hobby Lobby brand. And it's really pretty paper. I have enjoyed using this paper. And when I started making these clusters, I got so enamored of it that I decided I would just cut a few pages of that into these strips. Well, so I got tired of it, and now I have strips left. But they're usable, and so we're going to use some of them today. And this one I'm going to mount up on a piece of white, and look at that, isn't that a pretty wood grain? And it has a real pretty little filigree background in it as well. So I'm thinking that what we'll do here, even though these papers are not all from the same curated pack, I think the colors work well together. So I'm thinking if we add just a little bit of white in the layers here, we can layer this up and make a really nice friendship card this way. So come on, let's get started. I think the white band on this is just a little bit too wide. Let's go ahead and glue this one down. And I'm going to use my Books by Hand PVA glue today, just because it's right here and it's handy, and it's a really outstanding glue to use. I don't know if you have noticed or not, but I tend to glue in a very specific pattern. This Books by Hand PVA glue that I use is very reasonable. Now I'm thinking that this piece, oh, and I'll leave a link to that glue. I usually try to leave it. I think this piece needs to be just a little bit narrower than it is. Not by much, but just a little bit. And we'll see if that was enough. I think it probably was. I want to glue this down too. And then we'll see how that works. One thing about making these kind of clusters is you really probably won't have a lot to put on the inside panel, but because I have all these extra little scraps, I figured we could probably find something that would go on the inside. You could put this in the very center, but I'm going to kind of off-center that because I think it adds just a little bit more interest to having your eye move around a piece if it's not just all centered and straight up and down. That way, I'm trying to make these card bases flat because there's several layers on my little clusters. I'm going to use my grid lines here and here to help me get this straight. And I'm going to come in right like that. And if it's just a little too long, I'm just going to cut it off and not worry about it. There we go. And because this paper wasn't in there, but it's similar to that color and this color here, it will work very nicely for this card. I'll trim this off just a little bit. And this card's almost finished. I thought it might be kind of for continuity's sake, to put just a little white layer up underneath this tag. Now I've used some decorative scissors here on the border, and that adds just a little bit more interest also. So let's just get this glued on. And I added this little black and white twine after I noticed the little piece of black and white striped paper here, and I think it adds just a little bit more to the number of depth layers that we have on this card. So there you go. I'm not going to add any foam to this. I'm going to glue it down flat because the layer is all on this cluster. And there we go. Right like that. I'm going to put it a little askew, which adds just a little more interest here. And there's a nice card. It's already embellished. All we have to do is put a little note on the inside and move it along. And I have a little piece right here that came off of that, and I think I'm going to glue that to the inside of this card and call it done. If I find another little butterfly, I probably will add one of those in here later, but I don't have any at the moment. I'm going to leave a little tiny white edge here. And I kind of like to do that because sometimes if your cards are not trimmed just exactly right, then this layer will show through. This one happens to be trimmed very well, and I wouldn't have needed to do that. It's just a habit of how I build my card bases that way. And I like to trim where there's not stuff hanging over. But there's card number one. Let's move on and see what this one looks like. So now on this little guy, it's 2 tags. The bottom layer has this nice little scalloped edge, and the top layer, or the bottom layer, I made a little reinforcer here, although I don't think we're going to need it. I have already put foam on this because I evidently planned to use it for something else and then didn't. I colored the little eyes of my owl blue. These are hearts with circles and glitter and just a little additional stuff on there. This was a pre-printed tag, and so I thought with this little pink and brown ribbon, it might kind of be nice to do a little brown background, and we'll see if this won't become perhaps a little masculine card for Have a Fantastic Birthday or something like that. So let's get these glued up and see how this looks. This happens to be some early espresso paper, which is one of my favorite brown papers. I ran out of it several years ago and found a pack on eBay. And occasionally you can find this nice color of brown at some of the hobby craft stores. But not always, but it's a good brown to use on a card like this. With just equal borders all the way around, and these are some of the card layers. The brown one is 5 1/4 by 4, and this green one is 3 3/4 by 5. And then I have this little wood grain panel here, and I think I might put that in the middle of the card and then just put this in askew that way. But I think we'll need a little extra embellishment on the side, so I cut some tiny little brown strips to go on either side of this panel. But we're going to go ahead and glue that one down and then put the panels, the little small strips on right up next to it. And I'll show you how I'm going to glue those down in just a second. Again, now I'm going to use my grid lines here just for placement on this panel to get it in the center. And there we go. I think that works like that. Now I'm going to take my glue and run just a little small line of glue along and through here. It won't take much because these are very small little pieces. And then I'm just going to snuggle it right up next to that piece of wood grain there. And bring it down. And then I'm going to use my little cutter bee scissors and trim this off even. And there we go. There's one side. We're going to do the same over here. Just a little tiny bead of glue, not much because I don't want it seeping out. There we go. I had a question about my tweezers last week, and these I got years ago from Amazon. I will leave a link to a similar set because, there's a bazillion of these sets out there now. But they are fabulous for making cards and doing detail work like this. And so if you don't have a good set of pointed tweezers, I'll leave some in the description box below for you because they're very, very helpful. Now this one has the the foam tape on the back of it. So let's just run with that concept since we can't really do anything about it. And this little guy is just almost finished now. And there we go. And I think that makes a very nice masculine card. Now let me see if I have something to go on the inside here. I could use this little bit of paper that matches that and trim it down to 5 1/4 and not worry about the width and just put it in to use it as is. I could have done some brown edges for this as well, but it's really not necessary when you're doing a little inside treatment to bring everything that's on the front inside. Okay, so there's card number 2. Ready for a sentiment and ready to roll out the door. Let's look at card number 3. I thought this was so pretty, the little vintage woman. This was a piece of washi tape. Again, that same stamp we just looked at earlier. This color sort of kind of went with that, and this was part of that paper pack. So I was just looking for color when I chose this, and I found this piece that had these little, I don't even know what color that is. It's almost kind of a terracotta faded out color. But this is one that was 3 pieces. I had cut it, and as it turns out, I was able to tape it back together. This is regular Scotch tape here. And I thought what we might do is try to run it through an embossing folder and see if we can get just a little bit of texture going on this without separating that tape. So let me go ahead and emboss this, and I'll be right back. I'm tempted to put just a little spritz of water on this. I don't know whether it will help or not, but let's do it anyway, just because it's here and we can. There we go. Sometimes if you spritz your paper with just a little bit of water when you're going to do an embossing folder like this, especially when you're doing a little heavier paper, it helps to soften the paper fibers and help you out just a little bit. Let me run this through the machine. I'll be right back. Okay, I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's just got a small, tiny little bit of texture on that. And so what I thought I might do, just to kind of help build that texture up a little bit, is do just a little bit of black ink drag on it. I want to get a piece of scratch paper from over here and very, very lightly drag some ink over this surface. I don't want to bear down on it so that it goes into the indented places, because I just kind of want a little vintage look here. And then I'm going to glue this onto a black background piece before we put it on the card. I'm going to make a little wood grain effect on the edges here, just at the top and the bottom. And then maybe on the side, just a little bit. There. So that has kind of a vintagey wood grain look, but it has the same colors here that are in that original cluster. So let's see if we think that will actually work or not. I don't know. We're going to find out. Well, I think it will. But I think it needs to have a narrow black border, not that wide one. So let's trim this piece down to 4 by 5 1/4. That'll give us a white border around the outside as well. Let me get a card base here, and we'll see how it looks. So there's the first layers. And I still think that black is a little too wide, so let's take another little bit off. Maybe bring it down to 3 7/8. Let's try that and see. Sometimes these kind of things are just trial and error, aren't they? And that would be 5 1/8 then for the length. There we go. So the border around the outside, which is white, is going to be a little more predominant. And then we'll have our embossed piece. And then this one will lay on the top, and it has a little bow like that. I think this needs foam up underneath of it. So let's do that right now. Some cards require extra postage to go through the mail, and they're worth it. Mailing things in the United States has gotten more expensive, and I understand that, but mailing things in the United States compared with the rest of the world is still extremely reasonable. Trust me on this. And there we go. So there's the first layer, which instead of a 1/4 inch down is actually 3/8 of an inch down. And then on this one, I'm going to glue it down flat, and I'm going to put a little extra glue on this because you remember now this was 3 pieces of paper that we put back together with tape. There we are. And it has just a little tiny, tiny border around there. There's that. And now we'll put this cluster on and see how it looks in the end. I kind of like the way that turned out with just that little light black drag on it. And I want to get it to where it does not hang off the side, but that it sets off both sides a little bit here and here. And I want it up just a touch higher than it was. And there we have it. There we go. And then we can either put the bow up here. I had planned for it to go right there, and I think that will be fine too. So I'll drag my bow a little bit out there. And I believe I'll use a glue dot for putting this bow on. And I'm going to take it and just roll it a little bit with my tweezer, right like that, and put it on the back of that knot, and then put it right on the card. And there we go. What a nice vintage card that is, and what a pretty black and white and this interesting coral color that pulls all through that card. So let's see, I've got another one over here, and this one is going to be a gift bag. And here's the original cluster, which doesn't go with that, except notice this. See this little leaf? It's not exactly that color, but it kind of ties it together, and it is a good use of scrap that way. So I have another piece here, and I thought we would do it kind of like this. And I'm going to glue these down flat because it is a gift bag, and lots of times you don't want to have a bunch of stuff sticking out on a gift bag. So hang on, we'll get this glued up. Let me know in the comments if you all make clusters or not. I kind of enjoyed this process, and I hope you do too. And if you've never made any clusters out of your scraps, I hope you'll go over to Septeria 18 and see what she's got to offer, because it's just a nice channel, and she does all kinds of fun things with little cluster scraps. Okay, we're going to glue this one down flat. This was a great use of scrap. This little piece of lace here was, I had to trim 1/4 of an inch off of it. That's how small it was. These are some little dazzles from paperwishes.com, and all I'm going to do is put these on where the border here and here and here are approximately equal. And then the little tag says, especially for you, and the green and green, and I thought a little maybe green bow would kind of tie that together right here. And I thought when you know, honestly, who doesn't know somebody that needs a little chocolate bar once in a while? And I thought some of this with some shreds in it and a little chocolate bar, and then maybe just a simple staple there, and a little bow on this side. Wouldn't that be a cute little gift bag just for that purpose, to brighten someone's day? Okay, let me show you a couple more. These came coincidentally from a follower of mine, and I tried very, very hard to keep her mailing address and name and in with them, and for some reason I got them separated, but I want you to see this beautiful work that she did. And then I think we'll make a couple of cards. These are some clusters that she did, and she sent them to me and said, I love making clusters, but I don't know what to do with them and how to use them. So I'm hoping that this little video has helped her, and I apologize profusely for losing your name and return address. I am so sorry, because I think you deserve the credit for these beautiful little works of art. Look at the detail on that. She's got some pretty cool punches of tiny little things, doesn't she? Okay, and look at this one. Lots to look at there. And look at that one. How fun is that? And be a friend. We all need to be reminded of that once in a while, don't we? Follow your dreams. And just a card to say hello. How cheerful. So I got some paper out of that bunch that I'm working with today that I think will work all right with these. And let's just see. This one, and again, it's one of those that has been pulled apart. Well, it was cut apart by me to use in something else. Let me see, I think it may go this way. Yes, it goes like that. And when I'm putting these kinds of things back together again, you know, if you flip it over, sometimes you don't get it just exactly right. So what I like to do, I have two different tapes. This is repositionable tape, and this is permanent cellophane tape. Well, I don't guess they call it cellophane tape. It's just Scotch tape nowadays. But this one is, we'll be able to pull it back up again off of this side very easily. And I want to get this put in exactly the position that I want to tape it when I flip it over to the back. Well, I can see it on the front. There we go. And I think that we would be challenged to realize that that's 3 different pieces of paper once we tape it back together again. Now, because I have taped the front of that, I can pull a complete long piece of tape and just tape this down right like that. And then I like to use my Teflon bone folder and go over that seam a little bit to make sure there's no shifting going on. And we'll put the second row of tape here. And there we go. Okay. So there's one, and then of course I'm going to trim this little bit of tape off here. And then I can come back with my fingernail, kind of roll that repositionable tape up and carefully pull it off where I don't rip my paper. Just right like that. You're just rolling it with your finger a little bit, and then we're kind of pulling it easily back this way. And that piece of paper, for all intents and purposes, it's glued back together. Now, what I want to do is see how wide this piece is, and it looks to be 3 3/4. So the layer on that would be 3 3/4 by 5 for an A2 size layer, and that's what I'm going to cut this as. And I'm going to leave as much of this bluey green as I can and these real pretty roses down at the bottom here. There we go. Now this is number 2, and I was going to put it with this one. The colors are not exactly right, but they're close enough to use on a card like this. And I think we'll put it askew so that you have a little more interest. But I would like to put a layer underneath this on top of the white card base, because I think it needs a layer in a craft paper. So let me go get that and I'll be right back. So this piece is 5.5 by 4.25, which is the full card cover layer. I think maybe I'll cut that down to a second layer though, which would be 4 by 5.25. And then I'm going to put this little piece here up on some foam to utilize it that way. Get a card base. I think we'll do a side fold card for this one. Have a little narrow white border around, which will brighten this card up quite a bit. And then we'll put our welded back together piece down with a little bit of extra glue. And there we go. Isn't that a pretty piece of paper? I don't know what it is about brickwork, but I really like it. Some reason it appeals to me. I'll get a piece of foam tape. I have a video talking about my foam tape. I get a question about it every once in a while. And I buy rolls of 1-inch foam tape. And then I mount them up onto release paper. I used to use quite a bit of self-adhesive labels. And I saved all of my release paper off of all of those labels. And it makes a great use for those. Let me see how that's going to look about right there maybe. Okay. There we are. And I think this would benefit from maybe a little bow or perhaps a little piece of twine. Let me see what I've got that will finish that out. I've got this that was left from last week, but I don't think it's quite the right color. Let me see what else we've got. There's some gold in this, and this might be a good thing to use here. Let's try that and see. This has some gold twine running, or well, it's not twine, it's kind of like baker's twine with a little bit of gold in it. I hope you can see that in the camera. Looks like I may need to trim a little bit of that off. But I'm going to get my 10-second bow maker out and make a double bow. And I am going to want a double tail on that bow. I'm going to start with a piece of twine doubled over. And I'm hoping that this little bit of gold will just tie this all together. I'll trim my tails off about to the same length of the bow itself on this. There we go. And then maybe snuggle it. I'm going to take my bow and kind of work it between my fingers that way to kind of flatten that knot out just a little tiny bit. There we go. And maybe smash it down a little bit. There. And that way I can kind of tuck it right up next to that piece that we put on there. I'm just going to put some glue on the back of this. A nice little dot right here. Put it in there and put a little bit of weight on it. So let's work on this last one to utilize this Sending Happy Thoughts cluster. I pulled some paper out and we'll do the same thing here. This has a little bit of gray in it already, and I thought the paper that she used as the initial designer paper underneath these flowers really would set well on top of this paper. But again, I'm going to have to glue that back together and see whether we can't get that to work just like we did the card a few minutes ago. This is another 3 3/4, so we're going to cut the length to 5. There we go. And I believe I'm going to put a little piece of black up underneath that. Let me see if I have a piece here that will work. And we'll cut it at 4 by 5 1/4. And I think I'll put this one on a top fold card, just to be different than the last one. Glue that down, and we'll build this card. And I think because the papers on this one are so close to that top layer, I think it's going to be a little easier to get this one to blend in than it was the other one. A little extra glue, and I'm going to put the darker edge down at the bottom on this. There we go. And I cut my little temporary tape off the top of that one, so all I need to do now is to roll it off the bottom piece here. You just have to kind of work it with your fingernail till you get it started. And there we go. Right like that. And sending happy thoughts. And that card's done. Let me glue this down. And my sweet little follower that sent me these, I so appreciate them and am very grateful to you. And I apologize again for misplacing the name. So thank you. Take my thanks. But aren't those pretty? And this one's all ready to go too. There we go. So this is just an idea of how you can use a few clusters that use a lot of scraps for you. They're just different, a different way to store focal points in your studio as clusters so that you can pull them out and use them for all kinds of little things. So I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye, everybody.